The warehouse is 412,000 square feet of concrete and steel and organized motion. 14 dock doors on the south wall, 37 aisles of racking that rise 42 feet to the ceiling joists, 11,400 pallet positions, and one man on a forklift who's been quietly fixing a $41 million problem for 3 years while earning $19.80 an hour. And while the company that employs him does not know his name and does not know his system and does not know that the reason their flagship distribution center outperforms every other facility in the network by 34% is not the software and not the management and not the equipment, but a forklift operator on the night shift who taught himself to code in the front seat of a truck with 230,000 miles on it in a warehouse parking lot in Memphis, Tennessee. The forklift operator's name is Heath Oakes. He is 44 years old. He has worked at Ellsworth Distribution Solutions for 17 years. He operates a Crown FC 5200 reach truck, the narrow aisle machine that moves between the racking like a needle through fabric, lifting pallets to heights that require the operator to tilt his head back and trust the machine, and trust the rack, and trust the math of weight distribution and center of gravity that determines whether the pallet goes to the shelf or the pallet goes to the floor. Heath trusts the math. Heath has always trusted the math. The math is the part of the job that the company does not know about because the company thinks that forklift operators drive forklifts. And the driving is the skill, and the skill is the job, but the job is not the driving. The job is the thinking that occurs during the driving, the constant calculation of distance and weight and time and sequence that a forklift operator performs 11 hours per night, 5 nights per week, 50 weeks per year, for 17 years. And that produces a kind of intelligence that no software engineer has ever modeled, because no software engineer has ever driven a forklift for 17 years. The warehouse is Distribution Center 7, DC7 in the company's nomenclature, the flagship facility, the largest and oldest of 14 distribution centers that constitute the logistics network of Ellsworth Distribution Solutions. Ellsworth moves product, consumer goods, industrial supplies, food service packaging, pharmaceutical logistics, from manufacturers to retailers across 23 states. The company generates $890 million in annual revenue. The company employs 4,200 people. The company was founded in 1962 by a man named Ira Ellsworth, who owned a single truck and a single route, and who built the company the way people build companies in 1962. By driving the truck himself, by loading the truck himself, by delivering the product himself, by understanding the relationship between the load and the route and the customer, the way a forklift operator understands the relationship between the pallet and the rack and the pick path. Ira's grandson runs the company now. Ira died in 1998 with a Class A CDL in his wallet that he never let expire. Every year, even after the company had grown to 9 facilities and 1,200 employees, Ira renewed the license. Every year, the DMV clerk would say, "Mr. Ellsworth, you're 73. Do you still need this?" And Ira would say, "I still know how to drive a truck," and the clerk would process the renewal. Because Ira still did know how to drive a truck, and the knowing was not a credential, it was an identity, and the identity was, I am the man who drives the truck and loads the freight and delivers the product, and the company that bears my name exists because I did those things with my hands before I did them with my signature. Neville kept a photograph of Ira's first truck on the wall of every distribution center. A 1962 International Harvester Lodestar, red cab, flatbed, the truck that was the company before the company was a company. The photograph was in the lobby of DC7. The photograph had been there for 30 years. Graham had not looked at the photograph in years. The photograph was the wallpaper of inheritance, visible, familiar, invisible. The CEO's name is Graham Ellsworth. He is 58 years old. He is the 3rd-generation owner and CEO of Ellsworth Distribution Solutions. His grandfather built the company from a truck. His father, Neville, built the company from a regional carrier into a national logistics operation. The acquisitions, the facility construction, the technology investments that transformed a trucking company into a distribution network. Neville understood warehouses. Neville walked the floors. Neville knew the dock doors by number and the forklift operators by name and the pick rates by shift, because Neville had loaded trucks as a teenager, and the loading was in Neville's body the way the lathe was in the machinist's hands, permanently, cellularly, as a condition of who he was. Graham is not Neville. Graham is the Wharton MBA. Graham is the supply chain optimization, the network design, the technology stack that a third-generation CEO brings to a first-generation company. Graham grew the revenue from $340 million to $890 million in 16 years. Graham did this through analytics and automation and the specific financial architecture that produces growth. The route optimization algorithms, the warehouse management systems, the labor management software that measures picks per hour and cases per minute and cost per unit handled. Graham manages the network by dashboard. Graham has not loaded a truck in 26 years. Graham does not walk the warehouse floors. Graham does not know the dock doors by number, but Graham knows numbers. And the numbers at DC7 are wrong. Not wrong in the way that indicates a problem, wrong in the way that indicates an anomaly. DC7 outperforms every other distribution center in the network by 34% on key efficiency metrics. Picks per hour, 34% above network average. Cost per unit handled, 28% below. Order accuracy, 99.97% versus the network average of 99.2%. Throughput per labor hour, the best in the company by a margin that the analytics team cannot explain. Graham noticed the anomaly 18 months ago. Graham asked Sterling Pemberton, the VP of Logistics, a man who managed the distribution network from a glass-walled office in the Memphis headquarters building across the highway from DC7, to explain the anomaly. Good management, Sterling said. Strong team, experienced workforce. Every facility has experienced workers. Every facility has management. DC7 is 34% better. 34% is not good management. 34% is a structural difference. Could be the building layout. DC7 was the first facility we built to the current racking specification. DC11 in Louisville has the same racking specification. DC11 performs at network average. Sterling did not have an answer. Sterling said he would look into it. That was 18 months ago. Sterling's looking into it had produced a 12-page report that attributed the anomaly to a combination of workforce tenure, facility design, and management effectiveness. The report said nothing because the report did not know what to say, because the answer was not in the data that Sterling examined. The answer was on the night shift. The answer was on a forklift. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, because this is the story of a CEO who worked the loading dock at his own warehouse and the forklift operator who had been quietly saving his company $12 million a year without anyone knowing. Subscribe to Untold Hearts, because these are the stories that the warehouse floor never gets to tell. Graham went undercover on a Monday night in October. The decision was not spontaneous. It was the product of 18 months of unanswered questions and a 12-page report that answered nothing and a number, 34%, that sat on Graham's desk like an accusation. 34%. The number said, "Something is happening at DC7 that you do not understand and that your reports cannot explain and that your dashboard cannot show." The number said, "Go look." "You could send an operations team," said Tobias Mercer, the night shift supervisor at DC7, when Graham called him directly, bypassing Sterling, bypassing the chain of command, calling the night shift supervisor because the night shift was where the number lived and the supervisor was the person closest to the number. Tobias was the only person at DC7 who would know. An operations team would see what the operations team expected to see. They would measure what they already measure. They would write a report. I have a report. The report doesn't explain 34%. So you want to work the dock? I want to work the dock. Tobias was quiet for a moment. Your grandfather would have just shown up and started loading trucks. He wouldn't have called first. My grandfather knew how to load a truck. You'll learn. The dock teaches fast. The badge said, Grant Fielding, dock loader, night shift. The cover, a temporary worker from a staffing agency assigned for a 2-week rotation. Night shift at DC7 ran from 7 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. The 10.5-hour shift, the shift that loaded the outbound trailers for the morning routes, the shift that received the inbound freight from the evening arrivals, the shift that did the work that the customers saw at 8 a.m. when the trucks arrived and the product was correct and the pallets were stacked and the orders were complete, and the completeness was the result of 10.5 hours of labor that occurred while the customers slept. Graham arrived at 6:45 p.m. The employee entrance was on the east side of the building. A single door next to the break room, a door that required a badge swipe and that opened into a hallway that smelled like concrete dust and diesel exhaust, and the particular chemical sweetness of shrink wrap, the smell of a warehouse, the smell that Graham had not smelled in 26 years, and that hit him with the force of a memory he did not know he had. His grandfather's truck, the cargo area, the smell of product and motion and work. Tobias met him at the door. Tobias was 51, broad-shouldered with a shaved head and a high-vis vest that had been washed so many times the reflective strips were dull. Tobias looked at Graham's boots, the steel toes that were new, the leather that had never absorbed warehouse grime, the soles that had never gripped a wet dock plate. "New boots," Tobias said. "First day. The floor will fix that. Come on, I'll show you the dock." The walk through DC-7 at night was the walk through a machine. The building was the machine, and the people were the components, and the components moved with the specific coordination of a system that had been running for years. The forklift operators moving between the aisles, the pickers walking their paths with RF scanners, the dock loaders building pallets in the trailer doors. The whole operation synchronized to the rhythm of the outbound schedule. The schedule that said which trailers left at which times and which routes they served, and which customers expected which products at which hours. The rhythm was precise. The rhythm was silent, not quiet, not soft, but silent in the way that efficiency is silent, the absence of wasted motion, the absence of confusion, the absence of the chaos that Graham had seen in other facilities where the work was loud, because the work was disorganized and the disorganization produced noise. DC-7 was not loud. DC-7 hummed. Night shift runs 167 people, Tobias said, walking Graham through the outbound staging area. 42 forklift operators, 61 pickers, 38 dock loaders, 14 receivers, 12 support. We move about 340,000 cases per night. That's roughly 2,000 cases per person per shift. That's high, Tobias looked at him. You know warehouse numbers? I read about it. Online. Online. Tobias almost smiled. Online says the industry average is about 1,400 cases per person. We do 2,000. Online doesn't explain why. Why? Ask Heath. Heath Oakes was in aisle 23 when Graham found him, or rather, when Tobias assigned Graham to work alongside Heath for the first 3 nights. Heath was on the Crown Reach truck, the machine that moved through the narrow aisles with a precision that Graham associated with surgery, the fork extensions rising 40 feet, the mast tilting, the pallet sliding into the rack position with a margin of clearance that looked like inches, but that Heath maintained by sound, by the pitch of the hydraulics, by the vibration of the mast, by 17 years of muscle memory that had encoded the dimensions of every aisle and every rack position in DC-7 into his nervous system. Heath was 44. Average height, lean build, the kind of physical conditioning that comes not from a gym, but from climbing on and off a forklift 200 times per shift and from walking the aisles during pre-shift checks, and from the constant low-level exertion of a body that works for 10.5 hours in a building that is not climate-controlled and that reaches 94 degrees in August and 38 degrees in January. His hair was dark brown, cut short, practical. His hands were calloused at the base of each finger from the control levers. He wore the standard warehouse uniform, dark gray pants, dark gray shirt with the Ellsworth logo on the chest, steel-toed boots that were 7 years old and that had been resoled twice, a reflective vest, safety glasses pushed up on his forehead. "You're the temp?" Heath said. He did not look at Graham. He was watching the forks, the pallet descending from the 3rd level, 28 feet up, the load settling with the specific gentleness of a man who understood that the cases on the pallet contained glass bottles and that glass bottles do not survive rough handling, and that the customer who received broken glass bottles would file a damage claim, and the damage claim would become a metric, and the metric would become a conversation, and the conversation would be about the forklift operator who dropped the pallet, and the conversation would not be about the system that told the forklift operator to put glass bottles on the third level in the first place. I'm the temp. You load before? A long time ago. How long? 26 years. Heath set the pallet on the floor. He looked at Graham for the first time. 26 years since you loaded a truck and they sent you to the night shift. That's either bad luck or a long story. Long story. The night shift is full of long stories. Grab the pallet jack. I'll show you how we sequence. The sequence was the first thing Graham noticed. The sequence was wrong. Or rather, the sequence was different. Every Ellsworth distribution center used the same warehouse management system, SAP Extended Warehouse Management. The WMS assigned pick paths, the routes that pickers walked through the aisles, the sequence in which they picked cases, the order in which the cases were staged at the dock doors. The WMS also assigned slot positions, which products lived in which rack locations, based on velocity data that the system updated quarterly. High-velocity products near the dock doors, low-velocity products in the back, standard slotting logic, standard pick path optimization. Every facility, same system, same logic. But DC7's sequence was different. Graham noticed it on the first night because Graham knew the system. He had approved the $4.2 million SAP implementation 6 years ago. He had reviewed the configuration documents. He had signed off on the slotting logic. The logic said that SKU 44-7781, a high-velocity food service packaging item, should be in aisle 3, position B-12, 12 feet from dock door 4. That was the optimal position based on the algorithm's calculation of velocity, cube utilization, and pick frequency. SKU 44-7781 was not in aisle 3, position B-12. SKU 44-7781 was in aisle 1, position A-3, 6 feet from dock door 2. That's not the system position, Graham said, watching Heath pull the pallet. Heath glanced at him. No, that's the right position. The system says B12. The system is wrong. If this story has touched your heart, take a moment to share it and subscribe to Untold Hearts, because sometimes the person who fixes the system is the one the system doesn't see. Night 2. The sheets. Heath showed Graham the sheets at 1:30 a.m., the hour when the outbound loading was in full rhythm and the inbound receiving was between arrivals, and the gap between the two was the time when the forklift operators could talk, the way machinists talk during cycle times, the way truck drivers talk during loading, in the margins, in the spaces between the work, in the time that the work creates. The sheets were printouts, standard letter paper printed on a home inkjet, folded in thirds and carried in Heath's back pocket. Each sheet contained a pick path sequence and a slot assignment map, a list of SKUs, their actual locations, not the system locations, the optimal pick sequence based on the night's order profile, and a route map that minimized forklift travel distance. I make these before every shift, Heath said. I sit in my truck in the parking lot for about 40 minutes before I clock in. I run the numbers. I print the sheets. I hand them out. You run the numbers. I run a program, a script, Python. I taught myself YouTube videos, free courses, a library book on data structures that I read during my daughter's soccer practices. The script reads the day's order data. I pull it from the WMS export that gets posted to the shared drive at 4 p.m. every day. The script calculates the optimal slot assignment based on that day's velocity, not last quarter's velocity. The script calculates the optimal pick path based on actual forklift travel patterns, turning radius at end cap intersections, weight-adjusted travel speed on the mezzanine ramps, dock door proximity. The script accounts for things the SAP algorithm doesn't account for, because the SAP algorithm was designed by software engineers who have never driven a forklift. Graham stared at the sheet. The sheet was a piece of paper. The sheet was also a $12 million annual efficiency improvement printed on a home inkjet printer and folded in thirds and carried in the back pocket of a man who earned $19.80 an hour. How long have you been doing this? 3 years. I started because the system was making me drive past the answer, SKU 44-7781, the food service packaging. The system had it in aisle 3 because the quarterly velocity update said aisle 3 was optimal, but the quarterly update uses average daily volume. In October, that SKU spikes, holiday food service orders. The system doesn't adjust until January. For 3 months, every October through December, the system has the highest velocity SKU in the wrong aisle. I'm driving 47 feet to pick a case that should be 6 feet from the dock door. 47 feet versus 6 feet. Multiply that by 300 picks per night. Multiply that by 90 nights in the quarter. That's 1.1 million feet of unnecessary forklift travel per quarter for one SKU. And you saw this. I didn't just see it. I lived it. I drove the 47 feet every night, every pick. I felt the 47 feet in my hands on the control levers and in my back from the turning and in the time. The 4 seconds per pick that the 47 feet adds, the 4 seconds that multiply across the shift and across the week and across the quarter, and that constitute the difference between DC7 performing at network average and DC7 performing 34% above network average. The 4 seconds are the 34%. The 4 seconds are the $12 million. The 4 seconds are in my back. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, costs nothing, and helps Untold Hearts reach more people who need to hear it. Back to the story. Night 3. The code. Heath brought his laptop to the break room. The laptop was a refurbished ThinkPad, bought for $180 from a reseller on eBay. 3 years old when he bought it, 6 years old now. The keyboard was worn smooth at the home row keys. The screen had a scratch across the upper left corner. The laptop was the instrument, the way a machinist's toolbox is the instrument, the personal investment in the professional capability, the thing that the worker brings to the job that the job did not provide. The break room at DC7 was a rectangular space on the east side of the building. Vending machines, plastic tables, a microwave that smelled like every meal that had ever been heated in it simultaneously. The break room was 15 minutes at 1:30 a.m., the same compressed margin that every night shift worker knows, the margin where the conversation happens, and the conversation is the work that the company doesn't pay for, but that the company benefits from. Heath opened the laptop. The Python script was on the screen, 2,400 lines of code, organized into modules, commented in the plain language style of a self-taught programmer who wrote comments for himself because he had no colleagues to read them. This is the intake module, Heath said, pointing to the screen. It reads the WMS export, the CSV file that the system generates at 4 p.m. every day. Order lines, SKU numbers, quantities, ship to locations, carrier assignments. The intake module parses all of that and builds a demand profile for the night. He scrolled down. This is the slotting engine. This is the part that the SAP system does wrong. Or rather, the part that the SAP system does correctly based on incorrect assumptions. SAP uses quarterly velocity averages. My engine uses a rolling 7-day weighted average with a seasonal adjustment factor that I calibrated by hand using 3 years of historical data. The seasonal adjustment is the key. It catches the velocity spikes before the quarterly update does. It moves SKU 44-7781 to aisle 1 in September, 6 weeks before SAP would move it. 6 weeks of optimal slotting that SAP misses. He scrolled again. This is the path optimizer. SAP calculates pick paths using Euclidean distance, straight line distance between points. Euclidean distance works in a field. It does not work in a warehouse. In a warehouse, you can't drive through racking. You have to drive around it. And you have to account for turning radius. The Crown Reach truck has a turning radius of 108 inches. At end cap intersections, that turning radius adds 3 seconds per turn. The SAP Path Optimizer doesn't know about turning radius because the SAP Path Optimizer has never turned a forklift at an end cap. My optimizer uses actual travel distance, measured by me on foot with a measuring wheel over the course of 3 weekends. I walked every aisle. I measured every intersection. I clocked every turn. I built a distance matrix, 37 aisles, 296 intersections, 11,400 positions. The matrix is in a file called distances.csv. The file is 4.2 megabytes. The file is the warehouse in numbers. Graham looked at the code. Graham had approved a $4.2 million SAP implementation. Graham was looking at a $180 ThinkPad that outperformed it. Does anyone know about this? Heath closed the laptop. He closed it the way a person closes a door on a room that contains something valuable and vulnerable, carefully, with the specific pressure of protection. The night shift knows. 42 forklift operators, 61 pickers, they all get my sheets. They follow my paths. They pick from my slots. The night shift knows because the night shift is who I built it for. The day shift doesn't know. Management doesn't know. Corporate doesn't know. Sterling Pemberton doesn't know. Sterling Pemberton wrote a 12-page report explaining why DC7 outperforms. And the 12-page report doesn't mention me or my sheets or my code because Sterling Pemberton has never visited the night shift. And the night shift is where the answer is. Why haven't you told anyone? Heath put the laptop in his backpack. The backpack was the container, the ThinkPad and the code and the distance matrix and the seasonal adjustment factors and the 3 years of work, all in a backpack that Heath carried to and from his truck every night, the way a person carries something that matters and that has no other home. I told someone once. 6 months ago, the day shift supervisor found my pick sheets. Dock loader left one on a pallet and the day shift found it, and the day shift supervisor, Nash Ridley, reported it to the warehouse manager. The warehouse manager called a meeting. The meeting was about deviating from the WMS. The meeting was about compliance. The meeting was not about the 34%. The meeting said, follow the system. I followed the system. For 2 weeks, I followed the system. DC7's efficiency dropped 34% in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The warehouse manager called another meeting. The meeting was about what changed. Nobody answered. I went back to my sheets. Nobody asked again. Nobody asked. Nobody asked because nobody wanted to know. Knowing would mean the system was wrong. Knowing would mean a forklift operator was right. The distance between a forklift operator being right and the system being right is the distance between the night shift and the corporate office. The distance is the highway. The distance is the 12-page report. The distance is the $4.2 million SAP implementation that a $180 laptop outperforms. Nobody wanted to close that distance because closing it would mean that $4.2 million was not enough and $180 was not too little. And the person who solved the problem is the person the company pays $19.80 an hour to drive a forklift. Night 4. The family. At 2 a.m., the break room was full. 15 minutes. The compressed margin. Graham sat across from Heath at a plastic table under fluorescent lights that did not flicker. DC7's break room was maintained, unlike the facilities Graham had seen at other centers, and the maintenance was Tobias's doing, because Tobias believed that the break room was the only space in the warehouse that belonged to the workers, and the belongings should be maintained. "Tell me about your family," Graham said. "My wife, Wren. She's a teaching assistant at Germantown Elementary, 3rd grade. She makes $24,000 a year. I make $41,184 before taxes. Combined, $65,184. After taxes and benefits, about $49,000 take home. Mortgage on a 3-bedroom in Bartlett, $1,340 a month. Car payment. My truck has 230,000 miles and is paid off, but Wren's car is financed, $380 a month. Insurance, food, utilities, gas, another $1,900. The math leaves about $460 a month. That's tight. That's before my daughter. My daughter, she's in 3rd grade, same school where Wren works. She has dyslexia. The school provides some accommodation, modified assignments, extra time on tests, but the accommodation is the minimum. The minimum keeps her in the classroom. The minimum does not close the gap. The gap is between what she can read and what her classmates can read, and the gap grows by 6 months every year that the gap is not addressed. Closing the gap requires a specialized reading tutor, an Orton Gillingham certified instructor who works one-on-one, twice a week, 90 minutes per session. The tutor costs $400 a month, $400. Our monthly surplus is $460. The tutor leaves $60 of margin between my daughter learning to read at grade level and my daughter falling behind. The margin is the width of a breath. He drank his coffee, black from the vending machine, $1.25. Ren wanted to increase her hours. I said no. I said no because if Ren increases her hours, Ren is not home when our daughter gets home from school. And the time between 3:15 and 5:30, the after-school hours, the homework hours, the reading practice hours, those hours are when the tutoring takes hold. The tutoring teaches the technique. The home practice builds the habit. Ren is the home practice. Ren is the $400 that makes the $400 work. If Ren works more hours, we have more money and less time, and the less time costs more than the more money. So you live on the $60. I live on the $60. The $60 is the surplus of a household where the primary earner has been running a $12 million optimization system for 3 years and earns $19.80 an hour. The $60 is the margin, and the margin doesn't know about the transmission. My truck has 230,000 miles. The transmission is the question mark. When the transmission fails, not if, when, the repair is $3. $800. The $60 monthly surplus, saved perfectly for 12 months, is $720. The transmission is $3,800. The math does not close. If Untold Hearts has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. A few dollars a month keeps these stories coming. Links are in the description. Now, back to the story. Night 5. The others. Graham spent the 5th night not with Heath but with the shift, moving through the dock, loading trailers, watching the system that Heath had built operate through the hands of 167 people who knew the system and who followed the system and who trusted Heath's sheets the way a navigator trusts a chart. A dock loader named Dalton, a 23-year veteran, a man whose shoulders were the shape of the freight he had been moving for 23 years, square and permanent, told Graham about the sheets while they built pallets in Dock Door 9. Heath's been doing this for 3 years. Before Heath, I spent half my shift waiting for forks to bring product that was in the wrong aisle, waiting for picks that should have been staged 30 minutes ago. The system told the pickers to walk aisle 14 before aisle 3. Aisle 14 is in the back of the building. Aisle 3 is next to the dock door. The system had the pickers walking to the back of the building first and then coming back to the front. Every night, back and front, the system was designed by someone who drew the arrows on a screen and didn't walk the arrows with their feet. And Heath fixed it. Heath didn't just fix it. Heath rebuilt it. Heath walked the building. Heath measured the building. Heath timed the building. Every aisle, every turn, every ramp, every intersection. Heath knows this building the way I know this dock door. He knows it in his body. And then he put what his body knows into a computer, and the computer gives us sheets, and the sheets give us the paths, and the paths work, because the paths were designed by a man who drives the paths. A picker named Faye, a woman who had been on the night shift for 11 years and who carried an RF scanner the way a musician carries an instrument, with the unconscious familiarity of a tool that has become an extension of the hand, sat down next to them during break. I was here for the 2 weeks, she said. The 2 weeks when Heath stopped, when management told us to follow the system. Nash Ridley, the day shift supervisor who found the sheet, Nash called it rogue operations. Rogue operations. As if Heath was running a criminal enterprise instead of a better routing system. Nash wrote a memo. The memo used the word compliance 11 times. I counted. 11 times. The memo did not use the word efficiency once. The memo did not mention 34%. The memo did not mention that DC7 was the best performing facility in the network. The memo said, follow the system. 2 weeks, my picks per hour dropped from 187 to 124. That's not a decline. That's a collapse. I was walking twice the distance for the same cases. My feet, I have plantar fasciitis in my right foot from 11 years on concrete. The 2 weeks made it worse. The extra distance, the extra turns, the extra steps. Each step is a micro tear in the fascia, and the micro tears accumulate, and the accumulation is pain. And the pain is the cost that the system does not measure, and that Nash's memo does not mention. The system made it worse. Heath's sheets made it possible. I pick 187 per hour on Heath's paths. I pick 124 on SAP's paths. The difference is 63 picks per hour. Multiply that by my shift. That's 660 additional cases per night. Multiply that by the 61 pickers on nights. That's 40,000 cases per night. That's the 34%. That's Heath. After 2 weeks, the numbers dropped. The warehouse manager called a meeting. The meeting was about what changed. 42 forklift operators and 61 pickers sat in that meeting, and nobody said a word. Nobody said, "We stopped using Heath's sheets," because nobody wanted Heath to get in trouble, and nobody wanted the sheets to become a compliance issue, and nobody wanted Nash Ridley to write another memo. So we said nothing. And then Heath went back to his sheets. And the numbers went back up. And nobody asked. Graham listened. The listening was the shift. The shift was what his grandfather would have understood. The learning that occurs not in the dashboard, but in the dock door, not in the report, but in the feet, not in the algorithm, but in the body that the algorithm moves. Night 6, the reveal. Friday morning, 5:15 a.m. The shift was ending. The outbound trailers were loaded. 23 trailers staged at the dock doors, ready for the morning drivers, the freight correct, the pallets built, the orders complete. The work was done. The work was always done. DC7's on-time completion rate was 99.8%. The highest in the network, and the highest because of the sheets and the paths and the code, and the man who created them. Graham found Heath at his forklift, the Crown reach truck parked in the charging station at the east end of the building, plugged in for the day, the machine resting while the operator who understood it better than the software that ran it, prepared to drive home in a truck with 230,000 miles and a transmission that was a question mark. My name isn't Grant Fielding. My name is Graham Ellsworth. I'm the CEO of Ellsworth Distribution Solutions. Heath was unplugging the charge cable. The cable is thick, the industrial power cable that charges the forklift's 36-volt battery, the cable that Heath has plugged and unplugged 4,400 times over 17 years, the ritual of the end of the shift, the motion that says, the work is done, the machine is resting, the operator is leaving. Heath held the cable. He did not drop it. He set it in the cradle. He set it carefully. The way a person sets down a tool when the setting down requires more control than the picking up. You're the CEO. I'm the CEO, Ira's grandson. Your grandfather loaded trucks. My grandfather loaded trucks. Your grandfather would have seen the sheets on night 1. Your grandfather would have known what they meant because your grandfather knew what 47 feet of unnecessary travel feels like in your back at 3 a.m. I know. I didn't see them until you showed me. I didn't feel the 47 feet because I haven't loaded a truck in 26 years, and the 26 years is the distance between me and the floor, and the distance is why I couldn't explain 34% from a dashboard. Heath leaned against the forklift, the Crown reach truck, the machine that he had driven for 12 years, the machine that had carried his body through 37 aisles and 296 intersections and 11,400 positions. The machine that was the vehicle for the intelligence that the company did not know existed. I don't need you to feel sorry for me. I need you to understand something. I didn't write the code to save the company money. I wrote the code because the system was wrong. The system told me to drive 47 feet to pick a case that should have been 6 feet from the dock door. The system made me drive past the answer to get to the wrong shelf. I couldn't do that. I couldn't be wrong on purpose for 10.5 hours every night for 17 years. I couldn't drive the wrong path and know it was wrong and keep driving it because the system said so, and the system was built by people who have never driven the path. I wrote the code Because being wrong on purpose is a kind of suffering that the company doesn't measure and the dashboard doesn't show and Sterling Pemberton's 12-page report doesn't mention. What do you need? 3 things. First, fix the system. Not my system, the real system, the SAP system that the whole network runs on. My code works for DC7 because I measured DC7. But there are 13 other distribution centers and 13 other night shifts driving 47 feet instead of 6 and 13 other sets of backs absorbing the distance that the algorithm gets wrong. Take my code, give it to the IT department, let them adapt it, the seasonal adjustment, the actual distance pathing, the daily velocity recalculation. Roll it out to all 14 centers. The projected savings across the network is $41 million per year. $41 million. That's the number, not $12 million at DC7, $41 million across the company. That's what a forklift operator's code is worth when the forklift operator has driven the paths and measured the aisles and knows from the body up what the software gets wrong. What else? Hire me to do it, not as a forklift operator, not as a consultant. Hire me as the person who bridges the gap between the floor and the system, the person who speaks both languages, the language of the code and the language of the forklift, the language of the algorithm and the language of the back at 3 a.m. The gap is the reason the system is wrong. The gap is the reason $4.2 million of software is outperformed by $180 of laptop. The gap exists because no one in the company occupies both sides. I occupy both sides. Hire me to occupy both sides. What's the third thing? The night shift. Not just here, at all 14 centers. The night shift is where the efficiency lives and where the innovation lives and where the problems are visible because the night shift handles the consequences. The night shift processes the returns. The night shift absorbs the misslots. The night shift drives the wrong paths. The night shift knows what's broken. Because the night shift breaks its back on what's broken every night. Give the night shift a voice, a representative at the monthly operations review. Input on system changes before they're deployed. The system changes come from the corporate office and they arrive on the floor as mandates, and the mandates are tested on the night shift's body, and the body's feedback never reaches the office. Close that loop. Let the body talk to the algorithm. The leadership meeting was Tuesday. Graham walked in carrying a printout. One of Heath's sheets. A single piece of paper, folded in thirds, printed on a home inkjet from a refurbished ThinkPad in the parking lot of DC7. This piece of paper, he said, holding it up, is worth $41 million a year. He set it on the conference table, the table that cost $18,000, the table in the room where the $4.2 million SAP implementation was approved, the room where Sterling's 12-page report was presented, the room that had never seen a pick sheet from the night shift. DC7 outperforms every other facility by 34%. For 18 months, I've asked why. Sterling's report attributed it to good management. The report was wrong. The answer is a forklift operator named Heath Oakes who taught himself Python in the parking lot and wrote a routing algorithm on a $180 laptop that outperforms our $4.2 million SAP system. Heath has been running his system for 3 years. His system calculates daily velocity-adjusted slot assignments and actual distance pick paths. His system is why DC7 is 34% better. His system is worth $12 million a year at DC7 alone. Deployed across all 14 centers, the projected value is $41 million annually. Sterling shifted in his chair. If this system was running outside the WMS, there are compliance concerns, unauthorized modifications to pick paths. The unauthorized modification produced $12 million in annual savings. The authorized system produced a 12-page report that couldn't explain it. I'm less concerned about compliance than I am about the fact that a forklift operator solved a problem that our analytics team, our IT department, and our VP of logistics could not identify for 18 months. The CTO, a man named Benedict Cromwell, leaned forward. If the code is functional, we can review it. Integrate the logic into the WMS as a custom module, the seasonal adjustment and the actual distance pathing. These are solvable within the SAP framework. The question is whether the algorithm generalizes across facilities. It generalizes if you measure the facilities. Heath measured DC7 by hand, every aisle, every intersection, every turning radius. The measurement is the foundation, the code is the structure. Deploy measurement teams to all 14 centers, build the distance matrices, calibrate the seasonal adjustments. The cost of the measurement and integration is approximately $380,000. The annual return is $41 million. The ratio is 108:1. Graham held up the sheet again. This piece of paper was printed on a home inkjet by a man who earns $19.80 an hour and who cannot afford to repair his truck's transmission. This man saved us $12 million a year, and we paid him $19.80 an hour to do it, and we didn't know he was doing it, and we didn't know because nobody on this floor has visited the night shift at DC7 in 18 months. The paper is here now. The paper is the night shift's voice, and the night shift has been talking for 3 years. We just weren't listening. System integration. Heath's Python code is reviewed by the IT department. The logic, seasonal velocity adjustment, actual distance pathing, daily slot recalculation is validated, documented, and integrated into the SAP WMS as a custom module. The module is named Floor Logic. The name is Heath's suggestion. The name says what the module is, the logic of the floor, the intelligence that lives in the body of the operator and that the standard algorithm does not contain. New position. Heath Oakes is promoted to Systems Optimization Lead, a position that did not exist before Tuesday, and that exists now because the position is necessary and the position is Heath. Salary, $95,000. The salary is 4 times what Heath earned on the forklift. The salary reflects the value of a person who speaks both languages, the language of the floor and the language of the code. Heath's office is not in the corporate building. Heath's office is at DC7 on the mezzanine overlooking the floor. Because Heath needs to see the forklifts and hear the forklifts and feel the vibration of the forklifts through the floor. Because the floor is where the data lives and the data lives in the body before it lives in the code. Network deployment. Measurement teams are dispatched to all 14 distribution centers. Each team includes 2 forklift operators from the local night shift, operators who know their buildings the way Heath knows DC7, with the body, with the feet, with the hands on the control levers. The operators walk the aisles with measuring wheels. The operators clock the turns. The operators build the distance matrices. The operator's knowledge becomes data, and the data becomes code, and the code becomes the system. And the system is now, for the first time, designed by the people who drive it. Projected first-year savings across the network, $41 million. Actual first-year savings, $47.3 million. Because the forklift operators at the other 13 centers, once given the opportunity to contribute their knowledge, identified additional inefficiencies that Heath's model had not captured. The inefficiencies were local, specific to each building, each layout, each set of dock doors. The inefficiencies were known. The inefficiencies were known by the people who drove the forklifts and who had been driving past the inefficiencies for years and who had never been asked. Night shift representation. A night shift delegate attends every monthly operations review at each of the 14 distribution centers. The delegate brings the floor's observations, the floor's complaints, the floor's ideas. The first delegate at DC7 was Faye, the picker with 11 years and plantar fasciitis and 187 picks per hour on Heath's paths. Faye's first contribution, a proposal to relocate the packing tape station from the south wall to a position between dock doors 6 and 7, eliminating a 200-foot walk that every dock loader made 12 times per shift. The relocation cost, $400 in labor to move the station. The annual savings, $86,000 in labor time. The proposal had been in Faye's head for 4 years. Nobody had asked. Compensation adjustment. Forklift operators across all 14 centers receive a base wage increase from $19.80 to $25.50 per hour. The increase reflects the value of the operator's knowledge, the physical intelligence, the spatial understanding, the body-level data that the company has been extracting at $19.80, and that is worth, as Heath's code demonstrated, $41 million per year. The cost of the wage increase across 588 forklift operators, $6.2 million. The cost is 13% of the first-year savings. The cost is the acknowledgement. 6 months later, FloorLogic is live across all 14 distribution centers. The module updates slot assignments daily. The module calculates actual distance pick paths. The module adjusts for seasonal velocity. The module does what Heath Sheets did, at scale, in real time, integrated into the system that the company relies on. The module is the bridge, the connection between the floor's intelligence and the system's architecture, the place where the body's knowledge becomes the algorithm's logic. Heath works from DC7. He visits the other centers once a month, rotating, spending 2 nights at each facility, walking the aisles with the local operators, calibrating the distance matrices, adjusting the seasonal factors. He drives between centers in a new truck, a company vehicle, a Ford F-150 with 800 miles on it and a transmission that is not a question mark. The truck was not part of the deal. The truck was Tobias's suggestion. The man who fixed the system shouldn't have to worry about whether his own truck will get him to work. Wren reduced her hours, not because she needed to. The salary increase from $41,184 to $95,000 changed the math entirely. Wren reduced her hours because the time between 3:15 and 5:30 is when the tutoring takes hold, and the tutoring is working. Heath's daughter is reading, not at grade level yet. The gap is closing. 6 months of Orton Gillingham instruction has recovered 8 months of the deficit, the math of remediation that says the investment is working and the investment is time, and the time is Wren's, and the time is possible because the margin is no longer $60. The $60 is gone. The $60 has been replaced by a margin that allows a transmission to fail, and a tutor to be paid, and a family to exist without the constant calculation of survival that defines 17 years of $19.80 an hour. Heath still visits the night shift. Not as a forklift operator, as the system's optimization lead, the person who bridges the floor and the code, the person whose office overlooks the floor because the floor is where the data lives. He visits on Thursday nights. He walks the aisles. He talks to the operators. He listens to the body's feedback. The backs, the feet, the hands, the specific physical intelligence that tells him what the algorithm gets right and what the algorithm gets wrong, and what the algorithm will never get right without a person who has driven the paths. Heath carries a sheet in his back pocket. Not a pick sheet. He doesn't need pick sheets anymore. The system does what the sheets did. The sheet is the first one. The first pick sheet he ever printed 3 years ago on the ThinkPad in the parking lot, the sheet that started the system that saved $47 million. The sheet is folded in thirds. The sheet is worn at the creases. The sheet is the artifact, the evidence that the floor had the answer before the algorithm asked the question. Graham visits DC7 on Thursday nights. He walks the floor with Heath. He does not carry a sheet. He carries something else. The understanding that his grandfather's company, the company built from a truck and a route, and a man who loaded the freight himself, is a company that runs on the knowledge of the people who drive the forklifts and walk the aisles and build the pallets, and that the knowledge is not a line item and the knowledge is not a dashboard metric. And the knowledge is the irreplaceable human intelligence that no SAP implementation can purchase, and that no 12-page report can contain, and that lives permanently in the hands and the backs and the feet of the people who do the work in the dark. The ThinkPad is in Heath's office. It sits on the desk next to the new workstation that IT provided, the $2,400 laptop with 32 gigs of RAM and a solid-state drive and the processing power that the code now requires. The ThinkPad is closed. The ThinkPad is retired. But the ThinkPad stays on the desk the way the first sheet stays in Heath's pocket, as the evidence, as the proof, as the artifact of a forklift operator who taught himself to code because the system was wrong and because being wrong on purpose was something he could not do for one more night. Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that the person driving the forklift might know more than the person who designed the system, share it. Subscribe to Untold Hearts for more stories about the people whose bodies carry the knowledge that algorithms miss. Tell us in the comments, have you ever seen a problem every day that nobody in charge would listen to?